So today I want to talk about how to utilize death as our advisor on this spiritual path and practice. And I know death and the topic of that might sound kind of morbid, but if we look at the truth of it all, we have all signed a contract with death. We have a relationship with death, even if we don't want to acknowledge it, that ends up in such a way that we will all die. No one no one that I have known or heard of, besides maybe an incredibly ascended Zen master that stays in perpetual meditation, doesn't die. But otherwise, for all the others, the majority, death is not only a reality, but it is something that we are all headed towards. And it's a nice concept to talk about when we're living our life and we're healthy and strong, and it seems really far off. It doesn't feel like it's really tangible. And this is why I want to speak about that, because I want us to bring it kind of closer into our life to have a more personal relationship with death. Because when we keep death as our advisor in our time, in our life, in our mind, while we are in these bodies, it really helps us orient in a very clear, vivid way what is the right next thing for us, what is the Dharma, what is our divine purpose, what is our divine service that we need to be doing while we are here, what are the choices we need to be making. It's a very visceral, filter to look through and utilize in your life. And it makes me think of a couple things. Is in Buddhism, there is a story where there's this vast ocean as it is on this world and planet. And let's say there is one turtle and there's this one wooden floating ring on this ocean surface. And this turtle surfaces the ocean once every 100 years. And the probability, if you can just conceptualize this, for the turtle to be able to come to the surface once every 100 years and be that at the exact moment, at the exact time, to be able to put their head through that little wooden flotational ring, that is what we have come through in regards to be able to come into this physical body in this world. Those are the conditions and the causes that we go through in order to come into this very, very precious life. And so when we can take that, concept and really appreciate, my goodness, what we went through to come into this world in this life today, right now, it fosters a tremendous appreciation of like, oh my gosh, this precious life, this precious time I have, right? And on the other hand of that piece is this death aspect that we come in and it's so precious, right? And in the world that is so chaotic and turbulent and war also ridden in legitimate parts of this world, death is very like instantaneous for some people and also very sudden, and it's very shock filled, right? Even if it's like, oh yes, we're at war, this is the expected, right? Their death obviously can be very traumatic, but it has this very distinct flavor of coming back to ask very deep questions that I feel like really ties into our spiritual practice and spirituality in general. And it's easy. I go there too when we are not in the war ridden areas and we see what's happening, to feel maybe a sense of powerlessness and hopelessness. It's like, oh my gosh, what can I do, right? I can maybe don some armor and go into the battlefield, but I'm not really trained. And, then my precious fragile life, that my one turtle came up to the surface of the wooden ring, it's like, poof, gone, right? So as we navigate this kind of aspect of this precious life and death being right there, advising us, it provides us with a sense of clarity and essentially at the root of it, I feel like skillful means of how to effectively do the best and most good, in the greatest way, right? That's sustainable for us. And I was having a conversation with my teacher back in the day because I feel very strongly connected to my past lives as a warrior, in battle and fighting, and death and dying was just, I feel very connected to that, very familiar, very comfortable. It's like, okay, yes, this is what happens when you fight for a strong cause. This is, you give your life, you sacrifice, and then you die. And then hopefully the cause that you're fighting for, that you feel like is good, wins out overall, right? And as I was having this conversation with my teacher, it was very clear and apparent that dying and death for me felt easy as a way of talking about it, right? It felt easy for me to dedicate myself to a purpose of some kind and feel so passionately committed to that I was willing to sacrifice everything up to the point of death, physical death, right? And she posed this question back to me because she very much clearly saw I have a lot of past warrior lives of, well, living is harder, especially when we recognize the time that we are living in, that can feel really dark and chaotic, that to stay alive, to fulfill and do the highest dharma and practice and be a bright light for others who are suffering is potentially tremendously harder than dying. And this kind of came full circle as I was talking to someone, and it was for sure a morbid conversation. And this is all within the guise of like utilizing death as an advisor. They were kind of like, well, I always just think that if I don't want to do this, I always can just die. And I was like, oh, okay, wait, come again? I'm not following. And their rationale was, if I don't like the choices, the life I'm living here now, I could just die. I just can go, peace out. I'm good. I was like, okay, I can follow that, right? And it just highlighted in our conversation discussion that I then proposed to them is, yes, because death has not become an advisor in this sense. It kind of feels like a cop-out, right? Kind of feels like the excuse to be like, peace out, it's too hard, I'm good. And having a further discussion with them of how, let's not do that. Let's not use death as a cop-out, as an exit, because it really can be, because life is, genuinely that painful at times. And instead, how do we use death in combination with that recognition of how precious our life is, what we have come through to gain this physical body, to be like, okay, like now I have this physical body and death is legitimately going to happen. How do I utilize and curate my time, life, and mind in a way that shines the brightest light to our sphere of influence that absolutely then ripples out into greater spheres of influence, and then therefore the world. It's that cheesy cliche, that goes like, if you want the world to change, be the change you want to see. And this comes to a martial arts metaphor, because in our dojo, you are always training with another partner. And I was working with one of the white belts, prepping them for a test and refining the techniques, because you have to know a certain amount of techniques for the test. But as we were doing one of the techniques, I could just feel physically from them the energy of like anxiousness. And it came out physically in a response, like they looked like they were kind of really up in their shoulders as they're doing this technique. And I was like, dude, relax your shoulders. You're making me anxious. And they're like, oh, okay. And I'm like, settle back down into your center, right? Down where your belt is. Okay, yes. And that funny, not funny little moment of just kind of checkpoint and feedback is this is how we effectively share the light with others, right? Because we are so sensitive to one another. We feel so much. I mean, that's how we're just built. So if I'm feeling and I'm also reading off their body language, this nervous and anxious person coming to get me with this technique, I don't want to deal with them at all, right? So when we are able to train one-on-one in our daily life, how to settle down, ground ourselves, right, through consistent seated meditation practice, how to then open ourselves up to eternity and the light there. Then after our seated meditation practice, be able to go out, work, engage with family, relationships, loved ones, grocery shopping, chores, in a way that continues to embody the light without getting thrown off balance by a rude driver, uh, an ignorant person saying some very ignorant phrases, and you're like, oh my gosh, right? That feels very painful and hurt-filled. How do we then maintain this balance throughout our life, despite all these kind of energies coming at us? Is the art. It really is the art. I was thinking, and I need to definitely look up the meaning and the definition of art, because I think of our practice is an art. It's a spiritual art, right? Martially, when you work on techniques, physical body stuff, conditioning is an art. Call it martial arts. There's also the writing. Writing is a form of art. When you write a novel, write a story, or write a memoir. So life in general, I feel like, is this art. There's no one-way template around it. Sure, people put out templates that are like, you should follow this template and you will get, come out of that little machine and get this equation. It's like A plus B equals C. Go to work at some corporate job, retire, get I don't even know if they do gold watches anymore, but that was my time. That was what my parents tried to sell me on. Just need to go to school, get a degree, go work at a corporate job, and retire and get a gold watch. Like, this was literally one of the conversations I was having with my parents when I was in high school. And I was like, and I want to do that because why? And they're like, no, that's what you need to do. This is like the Asian cultural conditioning, right? That you follow these rules and you follow these templates that supposedly leads to what society deems as success. Make the money and have some stability, have a family, and it's successful. But we are so clearly seeing, as the generations grow up, that they're breaking all the norms of these templates, right? YouTube influencers who make, buku bucks off an episode. They're like, wait, why do I need a corporate job? Thing, it doesn't make sense. And so we come back to that word, this art that is essentially our life. We have this beautiful, beautiful ability and blessing to have and hear Dharma and truth. We also have the beautiful, incredible blessing of being able to practice this practice. And we also then have this other beautiful blessing that we have this precious body, right? And so we take all this and we look at on a day-to-day, or maybe it's a month-to-month kind of an assessment of like, okay, what's the art that I want to create with my life? There's no wrong answer. I really don't feel like there is. But when you are generating that art that is your life, and then you combine it with death being your advisor, it really helps to clarify choices that maybe you're like, oh, I'm not sure. Do I want the blue or do I want the black color, right? But then like somehow death comes into it and you're like, oh yeah, I definitely need to do blue because this is like viscerally, death comes into, what is it? It's like a time crunch. Instead of feeling like we have this infinite amount of time, oh, okay, I'm 20 or 30 years old, so my life expectancy is to 90 whatever plus years old. Then we have this concept of time that's feels so big. But when death is an advisor, it like time crunches and it's like, okay, right now it's like all of a sudden you have some terminal disease, diagnosis. What is it that you need to accomplish in your life before you go? And as tragic and awful as there are legitimately terminal life prognosis out there, like cancer and all the stuff like that, and then you go through the treatments respectively. I had this moment that was like, okay, that is super crappy for a family to be diagnosed with when one of the family members diagnosed with cancer, because it affects the family system, right? And if they have kids, it's like, oh my gosh, like what is that like to then be raised, as like a single parent, widowed, And as I was kind of mulling through this, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I took a step back and I was like, that's heartbreaking. My heart goes out to them. I send lots of compassion. And I was like, how does cancer diagnosis change any concept around all of us dying? And I was like, oh wait, it doesn't. And oh my gosh, that could be me. And right then it was like death was right there next to my side, advising me. It's like, are you doing what you need to do right now in your life? Irregardless of any kind of formal diagnosis, prognosis stuff, right? Because it was like tragic and a great reminder, like, oh wait, yes, we all are dying. Check. And oh yes, there's no definitive time that we know of, that we're aware of at this particular moment when we're going to die. Some people have those premonitions, right? So I leave that with you today to really utilize death as an advisor in your life, especially with how our lives are structured, how we've come into these bodies. Any thoughts or questions? Maybe kind of a morbid, heavy topic. Sorry.
No, I really like one of the last sentiments that you said. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, because I put my headphones on. But am I doing what I need to do? Yeah, because right now I'm kind of taking stock. I'm getting, getting ready for a lot of big changes. And I'm like, am I doing everything that I need to do to get to this other life that I see for myself? And sometimes the answer is I don't know, because I don't know what I need to do. but it's easier to see what I don't need to do.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's a little scary to think of like, you're gonna die, you gotta do everything. But that's just the extreme that my anxiety brain likes.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and I know that about myself. So, but yeah, no, I really, it's a really interesting topic.
Good. Yeah, and I totally get the anxiety, like, because then you put death as your advisor, and then all this angst comes up, and you're like all of a sudden inundated with overwhelm. Like, wait, but I gotta do 30 years of everything right now. And you're like, right, and your head just explodes. And to kind of maybe titrate down to like a little bit more specific thing, it makes me think of um, death as an advisor in the form of more maybe simpler things, and makes me think of like one of our friends' parent just passed and they live overseas, right? And they live here. And so they have to book their flight and go back overseas to be with their other parent and help them with all the memorial services and whatever. And my weird head, because I'm like finances, calculating, budgeting, right? Try to like manage life so that the next life can happen. I was like, dang, I wonder how much that plane ticket cost them. Like, was it an exorbitant amount of money? And then hearing death as an advisor was like, well, does that really matter if that's what they needed to do, right? Because this platform of death that was getting played out on, right? And I was like, oh yeah, it doesn't fucking matter, right? And it was also very similar, subtle thoughts and checkpoints when my husband was dealing with the death and dying process of his father. It's like, okay, we need to get home care. Okay, let's schedule X amount of time and hours to help us, right? And then it was like, okay, this is an X amount of cost. Should we add more days? And there was a real question of like, well, if we add more days, it would be supportive to us, but then what is it that we need? And it no longer became, this is just an aspect of the whole thing, was like about money, if you will. It's like the most important thing, this is where death is an amazing advisor, is it prioritizes, right? With great clarity, what is important. And it became very clear the priority was, okay, how can we have quality of time with him? Also, make him super comfortable, right? And super love supported physically, mentally, emotionally, right? And have this beautiful space where he can be in a peaceful state, at the house, not at some hospital with so many machines buzzing, and also not super taxing my husband so that he can be his brightest and happiest and funny and with his banter with his dad. That was really joy filled and not like exhausted. I stayed up all night with him. I don't have any energy to do X, Y, Z, right? And those priorities absolutely came because death was advising us, right? Of like, oh yeah, quality of life. Oh yeah, people get caught up in this societal machine where it's like, I have to work and I only can take 2 weeks off. And it's like, if death was an advisor, and also there's some kind of like life or death thing, it's like, does it matter that we need to take an additional 2 weeks off? It's like, oh, right? It becomes a very clarifying thing of what is right and appropriate for you, right? Which is super different for everyone. And like I said, it comes back to this art. Life is an art. And for sure, death and dying is an art. I mean, people don't talk about it like that, probably. So for last final thoughts and in summary, how to make death as your advisor in life is: dying is easy, living is hard. only hard, but it's challenging. But I also feel that we've come into these physical bodies because we were willing to rise up to the challenge and see what kind of art we could create out of our life and the lives that we potentially can touch. And on a maybe brighter note, as we make death our advisor on this spiritual path, you might find, as I have found, where there's moments that just feel so incredibly perfect. And I'll be in one of these moments in my life where it feels amazing. I feel amazing. Just everything feels like it's coalesced into this perfect, beautiful, sphere of just beauty and light. And I literally will have thoughts where I'm just like, wow, I could die right now and I would be so happy. And I just think, and I get kind of emotional about that, is I just think, how amazing would that be to be able to go, with that thought, with that experience, to have those experiences in our life, to be able to be like, yeah, this would be a perfect time to die. And it very much clarifies for me, it feels very affirmative when I have that thought, like, oh, right, everything feels correctly, appropriately aligned for me, what it is I need to be doing. Because I feel so deeply to my core of my being, I could die right now and it would just be perfect and I'd be so happy. I don't know if you have those thoughts, but I definitely do. And
I
it
do.
feels amazing. Yeah.